Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering License to Milkshake and Squid Baby. Hoo boy. Well, let me just extend my apologies to License to Milkshake because I already know all eyes will be on its sister episode, which has a reputation that precedes it. I won't say any more than that though because I've already got a lot I'll be saying during the actual review itself. Anywho, I just wanted to say, as always, thank you all for watching the video today. I appreciate y'all so much. And now let's just get right into it. Would it be weird for me to say that I have nostalgia for this episode given that it's from season 9? Because I do. I don't know, just something about License to Milkshake is nostalgic. I don't specifically remember its premiere or anything like that, or at least I don't think I do. I might remember the promos for it, it's all kind of a blur. So I suppose that might be the reason I carried this nostalgia with me. Something about that time before the second movie, it was just very memorable for younger me. The most unrealistic thing about License to Milkshake is that no one ever orders the milkshakes at the Krusty Krab. Like, are you kidding me? I love milkshakes. These days, whenever I drink one, I can't help but think of the planet-killing dairy industry that I'm supporting, which makes me then think that I probably should stop getting milkshakes. Yeah, I don't drink milkshakes a lot anymore, so I guess it's okay. Well, sorry, that was so off topic and a bit of a bummer. Anyway, I think it's funny that in Bikini Bottom you need a license to make a milkshake. This implies that there are milkshake regulations. This episode also just largely reminds me of The Inmates of Summer, which, if you might remember, is an episode I adored, so that's a good sign. Anywho, this episode begins with SpongeBob receiving an order for a milkshake, which, as I mentioned a minute ago, apparently no one ever orders at the Krusty Krab, but SpongeBob refuses to let the customer down, so he gets to making that milkshake, and it comes out hard as a rock, because in the world of SpongeBob SquarePants, making a milkshake is a form of artisan craftsmanship that takes time and training. And so SpongeBob is forced to go back to the Milkshake Academy to relearn how to make a milkshake. This is just the kind of silly, kind of plot that I love to see, so I'm happy. Much of the episode consists of SpongeBob's struggle to make a milkshake, which kind of reminds me of Le Big Switch. It's not often that we see SpongeBob struggle with something food related, so this is a bit of a welcome change. And then this is a small thing, but when SpongeBob is trying and failing to make a milkshake using the new machine, I loved Tom Kenny's delivery on "Oh dear." I don't know, it was such a small line, but something about it really just improved the whole scene for me. Also, SpongeBob is 100% the type of person to say "oh dear." In a way, it almost antiquates him, which is a win for me because that means we're for sure leaning over onto the adult side of that child adult line that I bring up from time to time. So far in season 9, we haven't been dipping too much into the child side of the line, and that is 100% okay with me. License to Milkshake, much like the episode I compare it most to, The Inmates of Summer, has a one-off character, Captain Frosty Mug. He's a pretty fun character. Sure, he's no warden, but very few characters can reach that level of excellence, and so I love Captain Frosty Mug for what he is. I think my main quote-unquote issue with him, or the thing that stops him from being truly great, is that he's not dramatic enough, and that might be down to the vocal deliveries. Michael McKean does a great job in voicing him, but maybe his voice isn't the right one for the character, especially when we get to the captain's dramatic-ass flashback. But I'm not too bothered by this, and it doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the episode as a whole, more just how much I enjoy this character. Poor SpongeBob doesn't quite take to the instruction in this episode as he repeatedly makes solid ice blocks instead of a good, creamy milkshake. And eventually, everyone's snide comments about him start to get him down, and he becomes determined to prove that he can indeed make a milkshake. And I'm right there rooting for him, of course. Maybe if this academy spent time actually teaching one how to make a milkshake instead of throwing them into it, SpongeBob would learn. Cause what the actual hell is all this extra shit? I know the point is that the Milkshake Academy is a boot camp, and it's funny as hell. Anyway, all of this means that we get more overly dramatic scenes, such as SpongeBob riding a motorcycle into the gorgeous sunset, and the training montage as a whole. But by the end of the montage, SpongeBob completely fails to get his milkshake license. I feel like this is the humorous combination of his inability to get a boating license and inability to cook anything other than a Krabby Patty, and I like it. When SpongeBob tries to prove himself one last time, we get the rather fitting reveal that his most staunch critic, Captain Frosty Mug, hasn't touched a milkshake machine himself in 20 years. Telling you this says something about our society and how it's the least qualified or least experienced or least secure people doing the most bitching and moaning. But that's a more nuanced discussion than my funny quip allows for, so don't extrapolate that opinion to anything, please and thank you. Anyway, after a wonderfully dramatic scene of SpongeBob saving Captain Frosty Mug from the milkshake machine, the captain imparts on SpongeBob a piece of wisdom about making milkshakes. One that he doesn't understand. The way SpongeBob straight up says he doesn't get it is hilarious. But clearly he got something from it, as next time we see him, he's making milkshakes like he was born to, using a method that surely isn't hygienic, the inside of his body. But really, are we even surprised by this? SpongeBob uses his body like a multi-tool in like every episode that we see him in, and I love that. Makes for plenty of fun visuals all the time, and this episode isn't an exception. License to Milkshake was a fun and enjoyable episode, and I appreciate how it was one of those episodes that blended serious and silly. However, this episode wasn't super funny. I guess season 9 just hasn't gotten its footing yet when it comes to the humor, because this is something I've noticed every episode of this season now. But this episode is also the best of the season so far, so maybe that coveted amazing tier episode is right around the corner. Maybe it'll even be the next episode. Heh, no, just no. Alright, well anyway, this episode is gonna be put in my great tier with a score of 8.8 out of 10. With the occurrence of Squid Baby, we have now reached the end of what you might call the honeymoon period of season 9. Because let's be honest now, I know you've heard of this episode. And I know what you've heard about this episode. Namely that it's a great big stinking pile of shit. Squid Baby is one of the show's most notorious episodes, up there with the likes of Pet Sitter Pat, A Pal for Gary, and One Course Meal. So suffice it to say, I may have my work cut out for me here. Because let me also get this preface out of the way now. I can't stand de-aging as a trope. Like, I've never liked it, and that goes for anything, not just SpongeBob. Now, Goo Goo Gas got a pass from me because it used this trope entirely as a gag and not as an actual, like, serious story beat meant to shuffle up character dynamics. Like, Plankton was not taking care of the babies or anything like that. They were just there. And I used to hate this trope a lot more, but I still don't like it these days. And so I'm sure that the reason I'm making this disclaimer is obvious, because de-aging is exactly what this episode's plot is all about, so you'll understand the first reason why I've got problems with this episode. Squid Baby starts off perfectly fine, depending on your parameters of what counts as the start of an episode. Because, like, Squidward's little relaxation time here is really nice. It's calming, peaceful, pulls you in, and by this point you know enough about the show to know that something is going to inevitably interrupt Squidward's relaxation. But it's once we get this inevitable interruption that the episode already starts piling problems onto itself. Squidward is, of course, rudely interrupted by his favorite neighbors, SpongeBob and Patrick, and obviously that's not where the problem lies. I mean, the Con Street Trio is a core part of this show, and it has actually been a decent bit of time since we've seen this trio in action, not since Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom, and we all know how much of a train wreck I found that episode to be. No, the problem here is that SpongeBob and Patrick interrupt Squidward because they are playing with literal, actual baby toys. What? Remember how just a few minutes ago I was talking about how happy I was that the show was leaning towards the adult side of the child-adult line, since that's my preferred place to be? Well, this episode clearly swung hard in the other direction, because SpongeBob and Patrick are acting like actual babies. Not children, babies. And this is before any actual de-aging occurs. But the episode doesn't take long to give us that bullshit either, as after a somewhat convoluted series of events, Squidward bashes his head on SpongeBob's mailbox. Instead of making him handsome, this head injury makes him a baby. Mentally, anyway. Although the show takes some liberties to give Squidward childlike features so that it can visually come across that he's been de-aged. And, man, Squidward looks weird as a full-grown baby. There's something uncanny valley about it almost. I don't like it. Squidward is also subject to a lot of head trauma in this episode, which I don't love, mostly because of the execution. I find slapstick at least amusing when it's over-exaggerated, but in this episode it's hardly exaggerated enough, and so it's not funny, and sometimes it even makes me wince, especially because for most of these assaults against Squidward's noggin, he's mentally and somewhat physically a baby. I don't want to see that. To be clear, this is not me saying that this episode is a Squidward torture porn, which is one of the critiques most commonly levied against it, but even I have to draw the line on some of the slapstick here. It's a bit much. Also not helping this episode is how some of the characters in it are annoying as fuck and do not help the problem. And by some of the characters, I mean the one and only Patrick Star. Yep, we're bringing that bullshit back too. After all the rehabilitative work Season 8 did to get this character back in working order, this episode goes right back to making him the bumbling fool who makes things worse to the point where you consider if he has anyone's best interest in mind at all. Well, okay. It's not quite that bad in this episode, but it definitely gets close, and I don't like that one bit. The last thing I don't like one bit is the fucking plot. After Squidward is brought to this baby-like state, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to take care of him like he was their own kid. And this right here is the number one reason why I hate de-aging plots. Squidward is a full adult, but now he can't consent to any of this because he now has the mind of a baby, and watching the episode like this is just fucking weird and odd. And yeah, I know this somewhat mimics real life situations, but typically when people are at a point where they need caregiving, they're not forced to assume the role of a baby to get their needs met. It's just fucking weird, and I don't like it. The vibes are heinous. If I wanted to see SpongeBob and Patrick act as dysfunctional parents, I'd go watch Rockabye Valve, where the baby is, actually a baby, and not a character we already know. Moving on, after far too much time is spent on nothing good happening, namely SpongeBob and Patrick taking care of Squidward in scenes that are horrible on at least 3 different levels, we move to the Krusty Krab. At least there was that cool background shot with the rain. That was nice. Probably the only nice thing about what's to come, as when we do move on over to the Krusty Krab, we get more not good things happening. By this point in the episode, I'm rather bored and a bit uncomfortable, not something I want to be. Squid Baby proceeds to exhibit the joys of capitalism when Squidward, the baby, is forced to man the register. Oh, I guess the my leg joke in this part was funny, that's another nice thing, but this whole scene is soured by the frustrating fact that no one can see that Squidward is a literal baby and cannot do anything right now, and then SpongeBob is somehow blamed for everything that's going on. Mind you, Patrick has conveniently disappeared by this point in the episode, which is also frustrating as hell, but finally, after more head trauma of course, Squidward is back to being an adult. With a shit-filled diaper. Well, at least he wasn't conscious for all of this. Yeah, Squid Baby has certainly earned some of its hate. I mean, it's not a good episode. It's just not. Now, it's not the spawn of Satan, like some make it out to be, but it's not pleasant. The de-aging, not good. The repetitive head trauma, not good. The humor, not good. The plot, not good. The writing, more of a joke than the actual comedy in this episode. I just did not enjoy watching this one. Whenever I wasn't bored, I was legitimately put off by what I was seeing. And so, after some careful deliberation, I think the best place to put this episode is in my bad tier, where it comes in with a score of 3.5 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. While I was thinking about how License to Milkshake was a nostalgic episode for me, I started thinking about how I honestly have nostalgia for all of Season 9A. As I said, something about those pre-second movie times just stuck in my mind. I mean, it's probably just a combination of my age, and how at that time, the SpongeBob fandom on YouTube was really popping off, and I was joining sites like SpongeBob Mania and all that, so just a lot more to remember. I'm also noticing that Season 9A has not had the strongest start. In fact, this is the weakest start that we've ever had to a season. 6 episodes in, and we've yet to have an amazing tier episode. That hasn't happened before. That doesn't mean this season is going to suck or anything. It's just a curious trend. Even more interesting is how for all the episodes that I've placed in the great tier, the thing that's held them back is that they just weren't funny enough. I wonder where the disconnect is coming from, and if that will continue throughout this season. I guess we'll find out. What I do know is that we're not out of the notorious woods quite yet, as we've got yet another infamous episode coming in hot in the very next review. Man, I get no breaks around here, but that's kind of just the way I like it. And so with that, I'm going to close things out here, and I'll see y'all in the next review.